Hi, Kev. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
It says Katie. I wasn't sure who it was.
Oh, that's one of my associates.
How's it going?
Oh, swimmingly. It's the response has been quite. We don't have the resources to respond to everybody who's on board. It's a real opening up happening right now. It's exciting.
Okay. Floodgates are opening. It's all coming through
because of the Declaration of Independence, and it's like a 100th monkey effect we're seeing finally, right?
Okay, here we go.
It's really good. Yeah.
That's really exciting. Do you know what? It's a really inspiring document. I've been on a high for 2 days having read it. It's really exciting.
Oh, you read it. It was a very impassioned reading you did of it, and I'm circulating it everywhere. So
yeah,
thank you for doing it.
Evoke, by the way, on that front, did you write it? Are these your words?
I contributed. Other people had input. We're trying to make it a group thing, but the thrust came from me. To be honest,
I had a feeling you were very much involved with the prose. It's great. It's great. It's really, impassioning. It's great.
Yeah.
And one of the really exciting things, being thousands of miles away across the ocean, you don't really know exactly how the vibe is in the States, and you get the feel that it's got a division of red and blue, Republican, Democrat. But when you read this document and you see that it's non-partisan, right, and that out of those 22 states, it's pretty much half-half. Is that about right?
Well, the official result was that the electorate was split right down the middle. But you can't believe the official line about anything. And when you talk to ordinary Americans,
and so when you got a despot, a tyrant, a monarch, whatever you want to call him, an oligarch, etc., and he's building golden ballrooms and making executive orders without any reference to anybody else. Well, every American must be up in arms about it. Surely, I can't imagine people defending this.
Well, they do, because it's very strange. Americans have always had that funny bipolar attitude about power. And I think in previous interviews we talked about this book called Democracy in America by a French aristocrat, de Tocqueville. He came to America in the 1830s, and it's one of the most insightful books ever written about the American character, because he said Americans will be more prone to tyranny than any other country, because each man is so concerned about their own individual liberty that they put the task of governance onto the hands of a few. And so it's going to inevitably lead to the concentration of power in one man ruling. And that's what you get all the time, because everyone's going on about individual rights, but they're forgetting the flip side of that is your responsibility, like the ancient Athenians said all the time, right? We all govern together. We all have a responsibility for the body politic, for governance. And Americans have forgotten that. So they put all their allegiance on one guy as if he's going to save them. It's very religious. It's like a millenarian movement. Really, what's around Trump? It's a religious movement, just like it was around Hitler, and the belief that
cult of personality,
the Führer principle, the leadership principle that one guy is going to bring you. It's a substitute for Christ, right? It's like one man is going to bring you salvation. And try talking to these people is like trying to talk to a Catholic about the Pope, right? A devout papist will not hear a word of criticism, and it's the same way with him. So you get that element for sure, but there's that middle ground that aren't that way, and they see what's going on. And the problem is that it seems so overwhelming now. This guy's got such absolute authority, apparently. But the more you see that in history, the more concentrated you get the power, the more vulnerable it is, and more quickly it can collapse at any moment. So, I think we're bound to see something like that, especially with him rattling sabers in Greenland, going up against NATO now. Stabbing his own NATO allies in the back, right? And it's just craziness.
Yeah. He's just. It seems like he's doing the Samson and pulling everything down on top of himself.
That's a good image. Yeah.
This and back to that sort of attitude you're talking about, where you got the Lord, who's the authority in terms of religion. I always remember. Do you know Alan Watts, the sort of Eastern philosopher guy. I think he was had a Californian radio station from London originally,
yeah.
but he was on this point too. He was saying the interesting thing about the USA is that it's a republic and a democracy, but this Christianity is extremely strong here. So is the kingdom of heaven a democracy or a monarchy? And
well, that's the thing. As a matter of fact, what's in America? It's been called the civil religion. So you take an element of Christianity, but then you weld it with the interest of the state, kind of like what Christianity did originally when it merged with the Roman Empire. Suddenly, imperial ambitions become the will of God, right? And Christ wants you to bomb these people, and like you get that. Americans genuinely believe that, so it's kind of a new synthesis, a new kind of civil religion happening. And it so reminds me of the Nazi period, because right after Hitler came to power, this minority of Christian pastors broke, kind of like our Declaration of Independence. They've issued a thing called the Barmen Declaration, and it said Hitler is Antichrist in the sense that he's asking for your total allegiance and asking you to ignore your calling to believe in Christ alone, right? And they were a minority of pastors, but they began to rally that resistance to him. And most of them eventually got killed. But the point is that they realized they had to create a polar opposite to the direction in which all the Christians were heading, which was right into the arms of Hitler. And I see it really analogous to what's happening in America now, right?
Well, one of the deepest principles of Christianity is serve the Lord, right?
Right. But the way that gets interpreted, as any good papist knows, is that, well, yes, serve Christ, but he's appointed certain people on earth to represent him. And of course, that's nowhere in the Bible, but they kind of create this stuff. So people genuinely, and I get this, when people were attacking me when we first put out that statement, I would get all sorts of hate emails from, I call them Trump bots, right? And they would say, Kevin, you don't understand, he's doing God's will on earth, right? Like they genuinely believe that. So, I mean, how do you argue with that? You don't, right? You just say, okay, whatever.
Well, you give them the pearls and swine, pearls to swine, is it? Something like that. But John Adams, just in this document, in the Declaration, I'm loving it. He was on this. So first declaration, 1776, and in 83, I think this quote is from, without a virtuous and responsible citizenry, the American Republic will not endure. And as you say, the Greek guy Solon was on this in a few thousand years back. Civic virtue consists of placing the welfare of all the people on par with one's own and shirking no risk or duty in the pursuit of protection of such general good. So he was. There's one. Is it Hobbes? One of these European philosophers. He said the only thing for the proliferation of evil is for good men to do nothing. Right.
Right.
And is this this is the problem now? This is why the Constitution has been lost and forgotten for so many decades, if not centuries, because good people are just rolling with the Reds versus Blues horse manure.
One of the reasons we're really pushing this book we wrote is because it addresses exactly that in there. This unique thing that happened in America where they melded individual with collective liberty. When the term "we the people," from "e pluribus unum" means "from many one." And people sometimes say, "Oh, that's kind of like everyone become part of this group mind." No, it isn't. It's this kind of dialectical understanding that you can't ensure your own personal liberty unless you've ensured the liberty of all. There always has to be checks and balances between what you want as an individual and what's good for the community, right? And Americans, because of their heavily commercialized, atomized, affluent culture, they've forgotten that connection. And it's all about my rights, my right to carry an AK-47, my right to attack immigrants, all of that nonsense. And they forget that if you attack the immigrant today, you're next, right? If you enshrine tyranny, it's always hungry. I think that was another John Adams quote, that tyranny is forever hungry. It can only grow. It wants to grow and expand and take over everything. And it can't be stopped except forcibly, or it collapses under its own weight, right? So, I mean, Americans got to get back to, and that's why we wrote this book, to get it back in people's minds that there is that balance all the time, which Europeans understand better, I think. That between maybe not nowadays, but traditionally there was that understanding of, I think they said in the French Declaration of the Rights of Man, after the French Revolution. He said, freedom consists of doing whatever does not harm the rights of another, right? So there's that limit. The minute you start tampering on the rights of others, and that's not a right, it's a privilege, and it's oppressing somebody else, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a quote by someone officially, but there's that one. It's kind of the checks and balances against fascism. I might not agree with what you say, but I'll always defend your right to say it. And talking about the French Revolution, you got those three: fraternité, liberté, and égalité.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe this develops out of the religious split. You've got the Protestantism and the Catholicism, but in the 20th century, that divides to communism, equality, and capitalism, liberté. So the communist versus fascist or communist versus capitalist 20th century divide and constant warfare is some people dividing fairness and some people dividing freedom.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like these terms left and right wing, right?
Yeah.
It's the same bird, but two feathers, left wing, right wing. It should fly together. They should learn to harmonize, right? The need for equality with the need for, personal liberty to a point, right? And anyway, how do people define liberty? What is it? I mean, in a commercialized society, it's a right to grab as much as you can for yourself, right? And is that really a right? Is that something we even want? So anyway,
and this is what you have. You have this, oligarch tech bros or whatever, and they're free to exploit as much as they like. This is freedom, right? This is liberty. Right. But then you flip it to the other side, and it sort of does full circle and amalgamates itself. Where you get we've got with an iron fist police fairness and equality, which is
that's the thing.
Stalinism.
Well, yeah, above a certain size,
and it's the same.
You got to. It's kind of like Machiavelli said: people will have to be forced to be free. And okay, I've lived among the Hutterite communities south of Winnipeg, where I grew up, and these are old order Anabaptist Amish people. And they, back in the 1500s, they were kind of the radical wing of the Reformation. They said we will live a New Testament lifestyle, so hold all things in common, just like it said in the Book of Acts. Nobody over anyone else. Everything's owned collectively. We don't fight. We don't pay taxes for war. We turn the other cheek. And they got almost exterminated by both Catholic and Protestant, right? Because they wouldn't baptize their children. They said, you have to be. It's got to be a conscious choice to be baptized, and all that. And so they were persecuted. A lot of them came to North America, and I went to live among them when I was younger, and it was amazing. These people, their whole attitude was different. They have the lowest rate of mental illness in the country of any group, because you're born into a collective and you're given a place, you're given a trade, and you belong, you have worth, you're valued, and everyone's working together. Like my mom's Scottish clan family, we were raised that way. I was raised by uncles and aunts. We had kind of an extended family where everyone took care of everyone else, and you didn't have to worry about yourself, right? So that works to, I think, about 150 people, and then the Hutterite colony split off and form a new colony, because above about 150, you develop hierarchy. So somebody has to kind of mediate to other people what's going on. There's no more direct relationships. At that point, that's when equality starts breaking down, right? And
at 150.
150 to 200, somewhere in there, they find that it's hard to remember the names of people. It's hard to remember relations. It could even be smaller, right?
Not 350 million.
No, because at that point, what do? In a hierarchy, unless everyone has so evolved that they have retained that quality John Adams talks about, right, of seeking the good of all and not worrying about yourself. There is, and it was interesting. I got to know in the 70s, I got to know people who had grown up in the Eastern Bloc, right, in Soviet Union and East Germany, especially. My bodyguard Yosef was from there, right? So he told me these stories. They came to the West, they'd say, we don't understand how one person can own everything like this. Like, that's crazy, and it's so unjust. Here, that was never allowed. The government regulated that, but we were given free housing, free education. We had economic freedom. You might have more political freedom, but you guys are slaves economically, right? And so it is possible to have societies that imbue their children with the idea of collectivity and not worried about running after a lot of material goods. And anyway, that's part of the dilemma, right? In creating inequality.
Right. It's a real irony, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
a paradox. I'm teaching quite a lot of Eastern Europeans these days, English as a foreign language. And there's one guy from Bulgaria who's a senior guy and really interesting to chat to. And he was telling me something similar in a way. He was saying that once the communist empire would block, or even say, once the Iron Curtain fell, it was great. Everyone was delighted because that liberty, that freedom was, much more prevalent than it used to be. A real kind of clampdown and paranoia about who's grassing in or informing on each other. All that ended, and everybody was delighted. But he said what it also changed was that the safety net of life, of the sort of physiology of life, evaporated too, and that he was telling me about. The local town drunk in his little town when he was a young man, and that even he, who never turned up for work, or was not contributing because he spent his days drunk in the streets, but he always had a roof over his head and officially a job to go to, and that these days, he sees extreme poverty where people are dangerously desolate on the streets and this kind of thing. And he said that just didn't happen back in those days.
Yeah, because you got the billionaire oligarchs moved in and bought up the whole economy. It's like when on the Hobima Cree Reservation, northern Alberta, they discovered oil. And within a year, everyone got a $38,000 oil revenue check in the mail, all these poor natives. And they're all so happy. They went out and started buying all this shit, Within 2 years, the drug gangs had moved in because it followed the money. And soon everybody had to hawk all their expensive stuff they got. 10 years later, they're all worse off than before. They're all impoverished and all the kids are on drugs. So the money made it worse, right? And that's the reality in a society like ours, right? New values.
The flip side of that one too is that the threat of extreme poverty and desolation is in a way the carrot and stick, the stick motivator, right? That if you don't get on the treadmill and start running as a debt slave, then this is how you might end up, right?
That's how they propagandize kids at a young age now. But I mean, hell, I remember, when I finished high school, I just went out and worked. I didn't care that much where I lived or how much I had. I was very focused on the state of the world and wanted to do something about it, right? So, it's how you're raised and what your values are. And you don't have to end up down that route at all, I don't think.
Yeah. And so on this one with the military and the police, it makes a very strong point in the document here that the declaration is looking for particularly civic, we call them civil servants over here. So your police, your military, judges, etc. And it's the enforcement aspect, right? The muscle. Are they looking at these ICE agents, for example, and just saying, we're having none of that, and come in the other direction?
We already have sources among ICE that gave us all that information about Neuralink and the immigrants being taken from the ICE prisons into the main Neuralink experimental center in Phoenix, Arizona. I don't know if we got into that.
I haven't heard any of this. Oh, but I do know that Musk is the boss of Neuralink. Is the name of the company, right?
Yeah, that people. I call him America's Joseph Mengele, because these are concentration camps now. These ICE facilities. They're bringing a lot of not just immigrants, but lots of poor people. Just scoop them off the street, take them in. Phoenix, Arizona, there's a place called the Barrow Neurological Institute. It's the main place where they're doing these Neuralink brain chip insertion experiments. Okay. And in that state, you have more ICE detention centers, 6 of them, more than any state in the union. And a lot of these people go missing and they go right into these Neuralink experimental centers, right? They've been working on this for a long time. It isn't just a recent thing, right?
Yeah, I remember a few years back hearing about this whole thing.
They want to mass produce them. This year in 2026, Musk has said, we're going to mass produce these Neuralink chips in the millions. Okay, so if it's just to help people who are quadriplegic, who can now move their arms, which is how they're touting it as a way to help people, why are they producing it in the millions? It's obviously the next stage in massive mind control and population control, right? What else would it be?
And then so under the blue flag, the borders open and in come all the desperate, footloose people, if you want to call it, immigrants, and then under the red flag, they all get rounded up, with the justification of cleaning up the mess, right? And then they end up in these facilities.
That's the way it's portrayed, but in fact, both parties, it's again left, right wing of the same beast. They have different strategies.
Of course, sure.
How to do it.
It's to create justification with the masses. Right? I had a student from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, 5 months ago or so, and she was having classes three times a week, and then she just vanished, right? And she was a great gal from Ecuador originally, but in the States, and I've got no way of finding out what's happened to her, and I'm really concerned that this kind of thing could have happened to her. Is there any avenue to pursue on this?
Oh, well, it's hard because, okay, here's the other thing that happened, really indicative. The same month that Musk announced that they were going to increase these chips into mass production, ICE changed their regulations saying from now on, there's no documentation, no paperwork done. We'll grab anybody and there's no record of the people we've arrested. Okay? Secondly, they boosted the time of detention mandatory. It was originally 7 days. Now it's 30. 30 days they can grab anybody, don't document it, and just keep them there, obviously for much longer. So, I mean, that's all the signs of a concentration camp, right? There's no difference. So that's the difficulty. There's no record of when this happens to people. We don't know where they are, what's happened to them. Right?
Wow. USA's on the brink, man. It's got to go, hasn't it?
It's already gone over. That's why we've declared the independence, to give people another rallying point, because right now there's a lot of opposition, but it's channeled into voting and protests. They say, write your congressman or congresswoman and come and do our protest. Well, it's way past the time for mere protest, but you got to take the power away from these people, take it back into the hands of the people. And that's the whole rationale of the new covenant and its declaration of independence, right?
Yeah, it's that great analogy you had whenever it was a year or two ago about the piston, right? Here's this declaration is the piston for the steam,
right? Right.
So how do you see this going? Where's it going next? It's malicious.
Pardon me.
Forming assemblies and therefore militias.
Well, the thing about a militia in the U.S. Constitution, you read the Second Amendment. It's not about the right of individuals to bear arms. It's the right of the community to defend itself.
Right.
It even uses that term, the right of militia. And they wanted a militia because that way you don't have a standing army. See, traditionally America was very anti-militaristic. They did not want a standing army. They had the experience of the British occupying their homes, and everything. And they say that inevitably leads to tyranny when you have a large army. And sure enough, right? So the idea of a militia is that the community arms itself to defend itself, right? And Americans are already in that state anyway, but they're just attacking each other. And so, yeah, the way it works is you make an appeal to the sheriff, community sheriff, who's elected by the people, and the town sheriff helps organize these militias, which in some cases they've done already. In cases of emergency, floods, whatever, they operate. So along with the court, there's that three aspects. There's the assembly, the common law courts, the militia. Those three are needed to rebuild a republic of the grassroots. And, people have done things already, like saying we're not going to pay money to the federal government anymore. We're not going to obey any executive orders coming out of the White House. We're just boycotting all that and keeping the funds in our community, right?
And so those three, the assembly, the courts, and the militia, are springing up, are they? So your 22 states. I'm imagining that number's going to rise.
What's going to rise?
So you got 22 states so far on the document.
People who've put their names to it, who naturally wanted to be anonymous for now, but there is the whole West Coast and all through the Northeast, even in the traditional Republican areas, people were signing. Like prairie states like Kansas, Texas, South Carolina, states that went for Trump. People in it are signing this as well. because it's
clear.
yeah, that we need to take more action than simply talking, right?
There was this great interview a couple of months ago, and this, I think might have been Georgia, one of the deep South states, which you naturally associate with the red Republicans, right? And you'd think would be, if there was any MAGA support, this would be the kind of place you'd find the support. And he was kind of country and western type guy in the bar, and the journalist said to him, what do you think about this second round of Trump? And he said in his kind of slow drawl, you know how you can tell when Trump's lying? And the journalist said, no, how do you tell? His lips are moving.
Well, that's American common sense. I mean, yeah, you see that all over. And I think the hardened Trump bots are actually a minority now. They just make a lot of noise. And,
well,
so I mean,
you used the word bots. Maybe it's all just, a tech bro smokescreen.
Maybe it's very easily.
Maybe it's very few at all. Who knows how it all works with the algorithms?
No, I know it's true. So I mean, yeah, that's the exciting thing about seeing it happen now, because there's already that innate thing in America where, like, I often use a comparison. Being raised in Canada, you're a subject of the crown. You get that phrase, "subject of the crown," in school, not citizen of a republic. Right? Two very different ideas, because you're the source of authority, not some bozo in London, right? So,
yeah, and this is what makes this original document, the first declaration, such a powerful, pioneering, covenant is the word, right? Because it pledges the allegiance to we the people and not some lord, above.
well, what's really cool about what's happened now? It's history's playing itself out again, because Canada, America, England, there was that triangle. And again, with Canada and the interview today we're doing on the Adwood Show at 8 with members of the Republic of Albion in England who kind of formed it. Last summer, we got together with some people and formed that. There's that connection. Like the British Crown was very frightened during the American Revolution that these Republican ideas would go across the water, because there was a huge Republican movement in England at that time, right? Wanted to get rid of the crown. There were like 6 assassination attempts on Queen Victoria later. The crown is not a popular thing, right? And then the French Revolution, revolutionary ideas coming across the channel. So we cross-fertilize each other like this all the time. And this is what's cool about what's happening.
I was thinking about the timing in the document here. 1620, the Mayflower document, the covenant, that's in the declaration here. That was exactly the time when the abdication, the execution of Charles I was revving up, right? So it's exactly in sync.
Well, there were like 20,000 Puritans emigrated because they were being persecuted by Charles's and Archbishop Laud, who was banning all services except, the Church of England, and arresting people and everything. And so, they came over to plant a seed so that even though the Republic in England was overthrown, it continued in America, right? And the same thing is going back and forth across the waters all the time. So, I mean, that's that common law tradition we have that we have to hold on to in the face of this global corporate thing going on that says, no, there's no authority but the machine, right? And its reps.
Yeah. I was fascinated by the 1871, I think it was, the Paris Commune. Do you know much about that incident?
Yeah.
For whatever it's been, 250 years, almost exactly, right? July the 4th coming up, that they've been trying to suppress it, all everywhere and all ways, and it's just unstoppable, right? You can't kill an idea.
No, that's true. And so I mean, it's great to have lived this long to see it. That really reminds me of when I was growing up in the 70s. There was still that lingering glow from the 60s where everyone in my generation was saying, look, authority is all bankrupt. I don't care what political party it's in. You got to resist injustice whenever you see it. And you can't trust any authority except the one you create for yourself, right? It was kind of like the Bible of my generation. Now you're seeing everyone talking that way again. So it's great.
I was in Vienna a couple of months ago, October, wasn't it? And went to a museum about, didn't know much about the Austrian history at all. And there was a situation early 1900s where the people got together against the normal situation as we are now, far too high and powerful authorities, and the people needed to, level the playing field, shall we say. And they implemented this accommodation rule whereby nobody should be expected to pay more than 25% of what they earn.
Right.
And even the Nazis 50 years later couldn't absolve that one that, was so powerful and so strong that its momentum kept on going even through the Nazi occupation.
Yeah, I remember that, the social democratic governments. And after World War I, there were revolutions not only in Russia, but in Austria-Hungary, the Austrian-Hungarian and German empires that fell. And you had new socialist republics, kind of middle of the road Labor Party type of socialism, but they did a lot of reforms on the ground where they're bringing in free housing for the poor and stuff like that. And yeah, it embedded it in the society so that it's kind of like with, I don't know the way it is now with the National Health Service in England, but traditionally neither Tories nor Labor would ever fiddle with that. It's kind of like an institution, public health care. And so some things can root in society, even though they seem to be against the fat cats, right?
And this is what's really interesting about these last couple of weeks, perhaps months anyway, is that the mask is off. Whereas, like the NHS, for example, they've been squirreling money out of it, under the radar of, we love the NHS. The NHS is always, what this Trump situation seems to be doing is just unmasking the truth of the situation. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, right?
No, that's right.
And so that seems to me to be real progress from our perspective, that confusion, that sort of fog is lifted.
That's right. And now it's a question of, giving people an alternative, a way they can build something different. And that's what fighting back really means, creating something different. So you're not, it's like the word in the Bible for forgiveness. It means in Aramaic, the original meaning of forgive means to turn around and walk in a different direction. And it said, don't be like the one who harmed you. It doesn't mean be buddies with them. It means just don't be like them. And so to walk away from the system and let it fall under its own weight, we got to start building this alternatives. That's the whole thrust of what we're doing now with all over the world, really.
So being over there across the ocean what's the New York situation? I always find New York a really fascinating city because I think there's more billionaires in New York than any other city in the world, and yet the people are really rallying. Right, this sort of figurehead Mandani guys there. I haven't seen too much action to back up the words, but it seems like there's a real groundswell in New York happening as a
there is
flashpoint.
I had the Democratic Socialists of America. They're kind of like left-wing Labor Party in their politics. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the mayor of New York, and there's dozens of local socialist mayors being elected all over the Northeast, especially. And you're seeing that real revival. And somebody in the DSA told me that their membership increased by nearly 1.5 million after Trump got elected. It just went. So there's all sorts of youth on the ground who are like moving to the left, but in a very, when you talk to them, it's a very liberating. It isn't kind of state socialism. It's kind of cooperative socialism, their whole vision of people doing that in their communities, right? So I think, that's a sign that you don't hear about in the corporate media, of course, but it's all over the grassroots. All this change really fertilized.
And people are really recognizing that these individual policies, such as cost of living, it's one that you see both sides of the Atlantic. There's a Green Party resurgence, as it's in sync as to what you're talking about. This guy Zach Polanski, again, he's trying to get into the Palace of Westminster, where you got to drop to your knee and swear an oath to the crown. So, you take it all pinch of salt, day by day, see what happens. But similarly, there's a real surge of membership behind these, different. Fresher voices coming through. He's just put out a very well made. What do you call it? commercial, party political broadcast. I'll add it in, sorry, 2 minutes. But it does, even if, perhaps the solutions aren't coming out of it straight away, he really sums up the feelings of why everybody is looking for something new and different.
Well, every politician does, I mean, like and that's it's not what people say, but what their position is in the system.
Why does it feel like everyone's running all the time? You are, we all are, like we can never catch a breath. Rent's up, water bill's up. You dread opening that next energy bill. And when did everything become such a luxury? Going to a cafe, reading glasses are too expensive, so you squint. Even going to the dentist gets put off. So you cut back and you pick up the pace. No holiday this year. Sorry kids. Living with tooth pain. You take a second job, sometimes 3, just to stay where you are. Wages stuck in 2008. Prices racing ahead. You never get to see the kids, snapping at them when you do. And it's the same story all around the country. Cities, towns, villages. People working full time, still broke. Builders building houses they'll never live in. Nurses queuing up at food banks. And we're the lucky ones, the ones with jobs. Some people can't run at all. Students buried in debt. Disabled kids denied support. Pensioners choosing which room to heat, if any. The pressure never lifts, so the rest of us run faster to help the people we love. The NHS is buckling. Our rivers are full of filth. Hopelessness sets in, and you're moving so fast, everything is just a blur. And that's when it hits you. What if the answer isn't to run faster? What if the most powerful thing we can do, all of us, all together at once, is to stop running and look around? Because the moment you stop running and really look, one thing becomes really clear. When the rest of us are killing ourselves to create wealth, and hardly any of it is coming back to our communities. It's going somewhere else, upwards to the pockets of the super rich. This isn't just an economic failure, it's a failure of leadership. The people we elected choose to serve the wealthy and not us. And yes, that is obscene. Good leaders put people before profit. They know homes are for living in, not landlords' portfolios. Energy is for warming those homes, not record dividends. And rivers are for nature and swimming in, not being poisoned to protect profits. And when we live well and we protect our environment, we don't burn out. It's how we grow. It's how our whole country grows. And yes, together, it's how we make hope normal again.
You go through a lifetime of watching people like him come along, and they say one thing, and then they get in power, and then they open their mouth, and the system speaks, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not about getting individuals into a bankrupt, controlled system. It's about creating something different on the ground where people rule directly, self-governance, and that's the whole thrust again of the Declaration, encouraging people to do that rather than waiting for the next national election, which is probably not going to happen, right?
Yeah, but that whole facade of which is kind of being replicated over here with very much with this Green Party and a new party called Reform, that sort of MAGA versus woke is that ideological divide and conquer, right?
And polarization. If you've got people completely polarized in their thinking, like Orwell said, that's why war is the best thing for any ruler, because it does that. We're good, they're bad, everyone's controlled that way. That bipolarity is also reflecting of the bipolarity within us, right? And, like the way you have to, I think Freud made that point, you have to be in a permanently dissociated state to live in society, because you have an idea of what you'd like to do, but then what you need to do, and what you believe, but what the system tells you to believe. And that eventually creates neurosis in everybody. Everyone goes around in a neurotic state. And now it's developed into full-blown psychosis, where there's this kind of massive death wish going on in the world. I think, suicide is third most common cause of death in the world.
It's in the Declaration. The suicide of the youth, right? It's just
it's huge. So that bipolarity is a reflection, just like Trump is a reflection of the worst aspect of America. He's nothing in himself. He's kind of a ward on the corpse, but it's that people eventually project who they are onto their quote figures, public figures, the way Hitler did too, right? And he's the embodiment of all of our shadow. And in order to reintegrate light and dark, we got to pull back from it all and say, no, we are not going to be dissociated anymore. We're going to live, our thoughts are going to agree with our actions and vice versa, right? And that's a hard thing to do when you've been raised in a dissociated manner your whole life, right?
Right, and the Declaration addresses this with the idea of cleansing, right? This prayer and fasting.
That's essential. That's essential. As a matter of fact, it's the Albion. When we worked with the folks when they set up Albion in England, first thing they did is they went off on a retreat. They unplugged all their devices and they went up. There's some amazing places, the ley lines, you follow them in England. And there's a picture of a bunch of them standing under that big elm tree. I think it's at Runnymede, where Magna Carta was signed. And they raised the Albion flag right at Runnymede. And they're standing under this beautiful old elm tree. And they said just the energy they felt from that, standing there, it rejuvenated them and clarifies you inside about what you need to do. And unless you have that personal kind of inner independence, it's kind of hard to tackle the world, and all of its problems. So that's what we urge people. Start first. Like there's a waterfall down here I go to. I just sit next to it for half an hour. I'm great. I'm just so clear after just that running water, and turn off all your devices, get back to what's real, right?
Yeah, a couple of years back, I did a lot of study with the Earth's frequency as a planet, 7.83 hertz. I remember it to be, and when you get into nature, that's where you find it at its clearest. As you're speaking there, I was thinking of there's a beautiful elm grove a couple of miles down the road here, and you go there and it's the vibe, right? It's the frequency.
Well, isn't it the case that the human brain is the same frequency as Mother Earth? That's what I read somewhere, but it's a very low hertz. But
they call it the Earth's heartbeat. Yeah, the Schumann resonance.
Right,
7.83 hertz.
Makes sense.
And when you're in an urban environment, Wi-Fi's and X-rays and mobile phones, you're getting frazzled because you're on the wrong radio station, basically.
I don't see how people stand a chance of even being able to think clearly, in those environments. So, yeah.
And then you can get into the symptoms of, what we call viruses and flus and head colds and stuff. This brilliant book called, I'll put a link to it, but a guy called Frobringer, he was looking at the history of electromagnetic radiation poisoning. So the guys who were doing the telegraph poles back in the 1800s did sending the messages. They were getting a special kind of sickness, which reads, in terms of symptoms, exactly what we would call the flu.
Well, like cancer clusters under the hydroelectric power.
Yeah, a real frequency of that. The power station guys get much more cancers.
Right, exactly.
And you think about the comparison between one guy on a telegraph pole 150 years ago, as opposed to what someone living in a city, you look at your phone if you're in a city, you got Wi-Fi signals, take your pick out of 50 or so.
Yeah, I know.
Getting frazzled.
And that's why, the people who seem to be in charge, like all these tyrants, Musk and Trump and all these guys, they're even more messed up than anybody. That's the thing to realize. Because in a society, when it starts falling apart, and you can look at this in history, it's proven time and again, the madness tends to get concentrated at the top of society, right? And you get clearer the further away you get from that. So people on the ground, like the guy you quoted from Georgia, about Trump, who said he's just living there, and it makes sense because he's not plugged into all these systems. So, and that's the other thing about voting people into the system. They become crazier the further they go up the ladder, right?
Yeah, all right. The Georgia USA guy, I know you mean, right? Sure. His lips are moving. This guy. So back to the Albion assembly. That's just really exciting from the UK's perspective or Britain's perspective. I love the name for the start, Albion, right? It's the ancient name for these islands.
Yeah, that was why they picked it. republicofalbion.com. And we had some long, fruitful talks kind of based on what we've experienced in Canada since 2015. We said, don't start with big assemblies, start in local groups, form cells of 3 or 4 people and just start talking, educating, try things. It's really worked. they're able to do that because people are more willing to sit down with a few others and start rather than go into an assembly with 15 strangers who you don't know and somehow get everybody to work together. To say nothing of informants and plants and all that stuff. So, I mean, they're starting from the grassroots, which is the way anything healthy always grows, like grass.
And you look at the Irish history and the history of the independence of the USA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is always how it grows, right? They can't stop the idea, and they try their hardest, increasingly ruthless. And here we are with Minnesota and this sort of thing, and they try and clamp down on people's liberties and freedoms, and it just blows up in their face, right? It just backfires completely.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a shift going on and now in a big way, and it's almost like people are rejecting at a very gut level the whole technocratic corporate thing and trying to pull out, right? And I don't think it's too unwieldy for it to last. My personal opinion is that when you look around, something that huge, it's like in nature, if you lose diversity, ecosystems are more vulnerable, right? And same here. Get to a point where it just can't operate anymore. And all the more reason to have local assemblies and courts at that point. This is what we fall back on. It's our, I don't want to call it a lifeboat, but I mean, it's the way we will have to eventually live again, right?
Yeah, there's a reset and a reboot and a refresh that's really, you can smell it. It's imminent that people want to get back to something a little bit more organic, as opposed to this crazy situation we're in at the moment. It's exciting times. It's turbulent, it's tempestuous, but it's unstoppable, right? It's just organically, naturally happening, and you was surfing the wave, right? And it's coming to the crest. It's really great. Yeah, what about your writing, Kev? Are you writing anything at the moment?
Oh, I'm writing more meditative stuff. I'm kind of moving in a more overtly kind of spiritual direction in some of the stuff I'm working on. This was the most recent thing we put together that really, it's selling like hotcakes, along with the one on Vatican crimes, dethroning a rogue power.
Okay.
And I know I always say this, but in the spring, I've been invited to come to Europe, and the Albion folks say, well, Kev, come in off the shore of Cornwall at night, we'll come in a dinghy and we'll bring you in, right? But, because, there's that standing thing on my head if I come back to England, but we'll see. I would so love to come back there. I'm being invited to places like Europe, South Africa, other places because of all this recent work. But I'm feeling. Oh, and my ancestor Peter Annett. He got thrown in the stocks at age 70, and guess who turned 70 in February?
Okay.
So I thought our lives have so paralleled. Maybe it's the time for me to go try to come back to England, and they'll stick me in the equivalent of Charing Cross in the stocks.
So you're saying next month or 11 months ago?
No. Next month.
Next month.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic.
It'll be officially half my life I've been working on this campaign. It started at 35. So
remind us what's the deal at the moment then with you coming to the UK?
May 2011 I got deported. I was trying to come in at Stansted, and Reliance Limited, the company that runs UK border, at least they used to, I don't know if they still do, but they deported me because they thought that me giving a lecture was a suspicious activity for a foreigner. So it was I don't know. I'd have to check. At the time they said it wasn't permanent, but you'd have to prove your basically your worthiness to be allowed in again. Okay, so that was like 15 years ago, right? And I mean, who knows? Everything we've done since then, if anything, has got me even more of an issue, for the Crown, right? But I wrote kind of a funny letter. Do you remember the one I wrote to Charles?
Yeah.
Inviting him to come and we'll have a debate, about why he needs to abdicate and step down peacefully. So that'd be great. I mean, I'd love to do that and just knock on Buckingham Palace door and say I want to talk to Charlie Boyer about all this stuff. I mean, I'm really tempted to just do it and see what happens, because I do believe fate moves in eddies, right? And I, you know, I feel I'm not afraid to do that. I'd just be curious more than anything to see what happens.
Yeah, time is non-linear. I'm sure it spirals, but it's interesting the freedom of speech side of things. You say,
Yeah.
you know, about coming to do a lecture. You know, everybody believes, or whatever it used to believe here, that, you know, Britain is a free country and you can, you know, utilize your freedom of speech at all times. But then I don't know if you caught anything about these protests with the cards here in the summer, where people were protesting against the Palestine situation, and so there was an action group, and you know they were pretty minor. They said they painted on the aeroplanes and stuff that they were flying over to help the Israelis. So they were doing some, you know, minor sort of vandalism, I think was the charge against them, this kind of thing. So lots of people were going up to these rallies in London, and they all had the same words on the card, and the words said something along the lines of, "We oppose genocide. We support the name of this group," which was Palestine Action, I think it was, something like this. Mm-hmm. And so anybody who had a card that said those words was picked up by the coppers and thrown into the van, and off they went to prison. You know, rush through the courts, and in they go. Mm-hmm. And there was a couple of really great stories where someone was sitting in a, you know, darkened police interview, having to explain themselves for supporting terrorism, and this guy said, read my card again, and he changed a couple of letters, and it said, "I oppose genocide. I support plasticine action." And so he'd allowed himself to get arrested, you know, thrown into the van, taken to the police station, you know, 6 or 7 hours later or whatever, with thumb screws on. He points out the couple of letters difference, the spelling alteration, and they have to let him go because he supports plasticine. You say that in America?
Plasticine, yeah.
You say plasticine, right?
Well, it's funny about, you know,
just to finish that one. These guys,
sorry.
And some of them, you know, there's an 82-year-old female vicar who got hauled into the cells and this kind of stuff. But they're doing a hunger strike apparently, and they're on day 70, 80 or something like that. There's really? Yeah, and you know, obviously the mainstream media aren't picking up on it, but there's a really strong sort of realization that's caught up with this, you know, Israel's support of this, you know, the People's Party, the Labour Party came in a year ago, whatever, as supposed to be a breather against this, you know, Tory conservative right wing government, and they've just, you know, haven't broken step from the march.
What are you doing? Come here!
People complicit in the genocide. Arrest the people that are selling arms, that are bombing, killing, allowing the starving of a whole nation.
Well, that's the thing again about the fallacy of different parties. They serve the corporate machine, no matter what party it is, right? And they run things now. I mean, like, you know, getting supported by this private company at the Border Reliance Limited, right? Not by British border people, right? And that's why you can't, you know, recognize what you're in, which is a police state. And so you have to operate differently, very differently. And that's one of the things in our training workshops with the different republics, we teach people right away to think and act as if you're in battle, not in peacetime anymore. And we've all been raised with the instincts, the habits of peacetime. And you got to adjust quickly or you die, right?
Yeah, it's a cold shower. I know it personally.
Yeah. Well, I know you do.
Yeah. Anyway, Kev, you got an interview with Sean Atwood coming up, and I was looking at the numbers. You and Sean collect and you know, you wonder how readily YouTube presents these kind of conversations to the masses. And I think for YouTube to display 400, I think I saw close to 500,000 on one of you.
At one point, yeah.
Yeah, so
it depends on the topic. Sometimes they censor us and they shadow ban his stuff fairly regularly. But
which ones do they clamp down on most?
When we mention big pharma, and when you talk about particular individuals and the ninth circle, often, and these satanic rituals and stuff we document. But
those are the ones that don't go so far as. But which are the big numbers then? Is it about the royals that seem to pick up?
No, the one that got the most was actually about the papacy and this new guy Prevost from America and his ties with China, and that went over the top. We had like 500,000 viewers.
Yeah, big numbers.
Yep.
Cool. All the best for that one.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah,
we'll see you again.
Great to chat. All the best. Catch you soon before your birthday.
I hope so. Yeah, it'd be great.
Cheers, Kev.